My name is Kerstin Neumüller. I am 34 years old. I'm going to turn 35 soon, but I'm still 34. I live in Sweden. I rent a place right now. Could you go back to the slide before? Yeah, thank you. Oops. So I rent a place in this fantastic old factory that you can see to the right. It's an old factory they used to make folding rulers, and now it has apartments and workshops. It's located about 1.5 hours drive from Stockholm. I know that many Americans are very interested in exactly where do you live. So that's where I live, and I grew up in the general area. I grew up about an hour's drive from here, so it's basically where I'm from. Yeah. And now we can have the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is my studio, where I've been for a bit over a year now. It's the first woodworking studio that I've ever had. And before I got it, I was just working in my kitchen, because carving my heddles is a really small, it's a really tiny craft. It doesn't need a lot of space. It's only when I started making a lot of heddles that I needed a lot of space. And so what is all this? What's the fuss about? Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. This is like a typical band weaving heddle. And then there's one of the first ones that I made, and I've placed an American, I think that's a quarter, maybe, and a Swedish 10 krona next to it, just so you can get like a picture of the scale. The big heddle is made by my grandpa, and it's about, do I have it here? I don't know where I have it right now, but it's about, it's something to hold on to. And what makes my heddles so small is that what makes them so special is that they're really small. They can almost all fit in the palm of my hand. These are weaving tools, and they are traditionally used for weaving bands on. So if we look at the next slide, thank you. You can see that the bands that you weave are actually not as wide as the heddles are. They're much slimmer, and that is because you pull, when you weave the yarn that you're weaving with, you pull it tight so that the warp threads are pressed together like this. So the width of the heddle defines how wide bands you can make, definitely, because the more holes and slits you have in the heddle, the more threads you can fit in. But it does not define how wide the weave comes out, as when you're weaving with the loom style that is called a rigid heddle loom, which I know is very popular in the US. It's quite popular here as well, but it's bigger over there, I think. But in this weaving, we're weaving with these tools. You don't use the heddle itself to push the yarn in place as you would with a rigid heddle loom. Thank you. I started carving these in 2020, just as so many other people started new hobbies in the pandemic. I was at our family farm in the countryside, and I happened to have a carving knife that I got for Christmas with me, because I thought, I'm going to the countryside. I'm going to bring a knife. So I was there, and there was a big storm that year, and then a juniper bush fell, and the trunk was quite wide. It was something like that. And my father chopped up this trunk for firewood, and when I brought it in to put in the stove, I lifted one up, a piece of this juniper, and I smelled it, and like, I'm like a craft romantic. So I smelled it, and I was like, oh wow, this is good juniper. They should be able to make something from this. Now the thing is that I think I have like 5 years of textile studies after high school, and so I've studied like textile history. I've studied folk costume sewing. I've studied as a menswear tailor, but I have no education at all in working with wood. So I was like, wow, I'm gonna make something, and I started making just wood chips. Basically, I just started carving away on these pieces of firewood, and then one of these pieces became a bit bigger than the other, and I thought, maybe I can make something from this. And I drilled 2 holes and cut 3 gnarly slits. And I was like, wow, I made a heddle. So the heddles that you see to the left here in the presentation is the first set of heddles that I ever put up for sale. I started making heddles, and quite soon I started getting a lot of questions from people who said, can we buy your heddles? Can we please buy them? Where can you buy them? What is this? How can I get one? And I was kind of used to not being able to sell crafts. If I know that there are many textile crafters looking at the presentation now, and some of you have probably tried to sell your textile crafts, and then you've just ended up in discussions about money with people, and that's kind of where my road ended. As for trying to sell textile crafts, I just stopped because I was just so tired of trying to I didn't want to spend time I didn't want to spend my time trying to convince people that what I was doing was worthwhile and good. I mean, I knew it, but I just didn't want to spend my time on that. So when I got a lot of questions from people wanting to buy my heddles, I was like, nah, no, I know what you're going to do. You're going to say that you want it, and then you're not going to want it when I say what the price is. But I continued to get the questions. So eventually I just thought, okay, well, let's try it. I put up these. I think that they are 7. There's 6 in the pictures. I remember the set as 7. Put them up for sale, and I set prices, and I just decided for myself, I'm not going to discuss the prices. The prices are what they are. And they sold out within a day, and I called my mom. I'm like, Mama, you know what happened? And she was equally amazed because she's also a crafter, and she was like, but people don't want to pay for craft. I'm like, yeah, apparently they do. And since then, I have a whole new business that just grew out of this branch of my crafting. I mean, I do a lot of other crafts as well, but this one has really caught on. And what I decided very early was that I would not discuss prices, as in, I would not haggle or like be justifying the prices for people, because that's just a waste of time. I'd rather take a walk or something. And I would not take any orders. So because I knew I didn't want to, and then a lady asked me, oh, can you make a heddle that looks like a sheep? And I was like, nah. Or I said, yeah, I did. And then I tried, and it didn't come out any good, and it was just kind of blocking my creative process. So then I called her and said, you know what, I can't do it because I'm not. I didn't say like I'm uninspired, but that was what was happening, and I decided I've tried, but I can't get it to work. So what I do now is that I make whatever I want. I usually work from an idea of a set. So like I'm making a group of, somebody mentioned horses in the chat. To the right here is a set that I made last spring, just when Russia moved into Ukraine. And I started looking at a cathedral in Kiev. I already started making these domed heddles, but it just became very clear to me that I wanted to make a set inspired by that cathedral. And the biggest heddle in the picture here, I raffled off and sent basically what I did was that I told people to donate money to Médecins Sans Frontières or Red Cross or some other organization as well, I think. And then just send me the confirmation that they had done it, and I entered them in the raffle. So that was a nice way of just contributing a little. I think I should do something like that again. Okay. So like to the left. To the left is where I started, and to the right is kind of where I am now. I realized earlier today that that's almost a year ago now, but I still think I think I've kind of plateaued a bit in like the technical department of carving patterns and stuff. I think I'm still like at this kind of level, but I'm not making golden heddles right now. Right now, I've been working on a series of heddle actually inspired by a heddle in a little bit further on. What do we have next? What do we have on the next slide, Andrew?
So, Kerstin, we're getting all of a sudden a little bit of a glitch with your connection.
Oh.
But I think we've advanced now. Are you seeing the picture of Lorianne?
Okay. Cave. You know, so sometimes the internet gives me, but now it looks like it's working. Yeah.
It's much better now. Yes. Good.
That's good. So last year I got the extremely lucky opportunity to go over to Iowa and Minnesota. I was invited by American Swedish Institute and North House Folk School to come over and teach the class that I teach the most right now, which is a 2-day class where people get to carve heddles. And then on the second day, they get to weave bands on their heddles. And I also got an email from Vesterheim Museum saying, hey, do you want to come and see our heddles? And I was like, yeah, yes, I want to come see your heddles. And this is a picture that I took on that day when I got to meet Lorianne, and she had gotten out all the heddles that you guys have in your archive out on the table, and she borrowed me a pair of gloves, and I could just look at them as much as I wanted to. And this is a fantastic opportunity. I think that anybody who wants to come and look at the collection is welcome to, but I was going to ask Lorianne a bit about that.
Yes, we do
Lorianne,
invite.
How would you go about if you wanted to? Yeah?
Yeah, that's possible. Just call the museum ahead of your visit, and we'll work with you to find a time that might be possible for people to come and take a closer look at the collection. Maybe it's something like heddles like this, or it might be textiles. We can also share whatever history we know about the pieces, because some researchers find that very interesting as well. So just a call well ahead of time and make an appointment. That's all it takes.
That's great. I'm sure that we'll put a link in. There's a link at the end of the presentation for the archive, so you can go online and see what's in the archive, right?
We have just a selection online, but still, that's about 500 objects that you can take a look at on the museum's website.
That's lovely. I wanted to ask you, Lorianne, before I start talking about what my favorite heddles were, I wanted to ask if you have any favorite.
It's sometimes hard to pick, really, but I think mine is one with a fairly decorative portion to it. And I think, there we go. Thank you, Andrew. If I had to pick a favorite, this is the one I think. This came to our museum in 1984, and it had come originally to the United States in 1865 with a family from Sogn on the west coast of Norway. And based on the name and initials, I think it perhaps had originally belonged to the donor's grandmother's sister. I think it's going to take a little more genealogy, but I think what I love most about this is that there's so much to look at here. And as you continue to look, you notice different things. And certainly after my visit with you, I started to notice some different things about the Heddles. For example, that you have these wonderful sun wheels on the top, but the more you look, you realize there's two different styles. One has 8 sections and the others have a little bit different sections. There's this wonderful scalloped edge with little points in different places, and then that kind of zigzag border at the bottom. But I think I like best that there's so much to enjoy, that all of these little details, and it would have, I'm sure, been a wonderful opportunity for someone to weave with this, because it would be a joy to use as well as functional.
For sure. Do you have any idea of what the words mean that are carved into it?
I believe it's a woman's name. The first name would have been Marta, like Martha. And then the next initial J would have stood for her father's first name. And then the D would stand for daughter. So we know that Martha's the daughter of someone whose name started with a J. And then Fedke or Fedke on the end is the farm that she would have lived on. And then I think there's just a little dash there, maybe because they were trying to fill the space. But we have just a little bit more research to do. There was a Johannes daughter from this family that came. It wasn't a Marta, but I think we'll do a little more genealogy and see exactly how this links into the family. But isn't that beautiful too, that you would have something of your own, something beautiful to use, but with your name on it to make it yours?
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's quite common that they're marked with, I haven't seen a lot of them with like the full first name, but there's like a very strong tradition of marking Heddles with initials. Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of Heddles. What did she say? Is it true that they were sometimes carved? Yes, exactly. Rebecca asks, is it true that they were sometimes carved by the suitors for their proposed wife? So not all Heddles are made as gifts for wooing, but some of them have definitely been so. Like when you wanted to marry somebody in the pre-industrial community in Scandinavia, you would give them gifts, and often, or in many places, it would be a very specific order, very specific gifts. So like you would start out, I think as I've heard it, you would start out with a spoon. And if it was accepted, you would go on like something nicer and then something nicer. And in the end, maybe you give her like a silver Bible. Not a silver Bible would be nice, but like a Bible. That's a Bible that she was to hold in her hands when you went to church to get married. And Heddles have absolutely been a part of this tradition. So I think this Heddle might be a good example of that. It's fun when you want somebody to marry you, you want to impress them. And you want to embellish the stuff that you give them, right? And it's quite common to see that the embellishments, especially on top of the Heddles, like they have grown bigger and bigger. This is like the Heddle that we're looking at. It has quite a big embellishment on top. And what would happen with this Heddle when you wove with it is that it would flip upside down because it's much heavier on what we perceive as a top than it is at the bottom. And I just think this is a beautiful example of an utilitarian object that's turned into something completely different. Like it's much, maybe like the value of the thing is much more based on the emotional value or like the cultural value than the fact that it's actually a weaving tool. Yeah, I think that's nice. I would definitely like to, get a Heddle as a gift instead of a bunch of roses or something. I would be impressed. That'd be nice. It hasn't happened yet, though. We'll see. Yes, thank you. I picked out 3 heddles that I wanted to show from the Vesterheim collection. This first one, mostly actually because I love the blue color on it. It started out with me writing a book on indigo, I think, in 2016. And since then I've been working it, like if I have to choose a color, it's usually blue. And I've been painting Heddles blue a lot. I have one here that I've actually made for myself, so I haven't finished it. And I don't know if you can see the color. You kind of can see the color. It's very similar. Yeah, it comes out a bit warmish here now. But it's very similar to the one we were looking at in the slideshow. And yeah, it was kind of gratifying to see, like, oh, that's like my cover. But there's also a really cute little mark. You see, there's the numbers 1815, but there's also a really cute little mark after the 15, the 5. That's the one. Yeah, isn't that cute? I would love to just work with that one and use it in different designs, but I haven't yet. We can look at the next Heddle, next slide. I wanted to show this one to you because the most common thing when I teach Heddle carving is that people want to make Heddles with hearts. And I'm kind of like, I'm not like a hearty girl, you know. I'm not like a pink hearts and flowers kind of girl, but there's definitely something to it, and this one is really cute. Here's the typical way of marking something with your name, MMD. So it would be her first name was something starting with an M. We can say Marte, and then her father's name is also starting with an M, Magnus, and then the D is for daughter. So if this was a Heddle for a man, which it wouldn't have been, but if it was, it would say MMS. So Magnus Martin's son instead. Yeah. And here we see the same, or like a similar scalloped edge to the one that, yeah, it's really pretty, to the one that Lorraine showed us on her Heddle. Okay, we can look at the next one. So this Heddle, I chose one Heddle from the ones that I saw when I was over there. I chose one to like work with and spiral away from. So because I never take any orders for my Heddles, I never have anyone else telling me what to carve. I'm free to do whatever I want, and that means that my carving is almost like a train of thought in wood. Like you can see me, I get an idea, I try it, and then I tweak it a bit, I'll make one more, and I tweak it in another way and I'll make one more. So I really like this Heddle because it was very simple. What's the primary wood used for? What does Kathy say? The Heddles in the collection. Oh, we can save that question for later. Oops. So, what was I going to say? Well, I like this Heddle because it was kind of like, not like the typical fancy floral stuff, but just I like this kind of very light embellishment that's on top. We can look at the next. Thank you. So this is where this is like my train of thought when I came home from the US and started thinking about the Heddles that I'd seen at the museum collection. I started out with the one on the top left. That's the first one that I did, inspired by the previous Heddle. And because the previous Heddle is very square, like it has a very square shape, and then there's a round on top. And it's something, it works very well on the Heddle in the museum collection. But for me, when I tried to make a square one, it just did not work. And I don't really know why yet. So I started out on the Heddle to the top left. I started out just making the like embellishment or like grip on top, covering the entire top section of the Heddle. I didn't really like that. So then I drew it in a bit. And on the second heddle from the left, you can see that I've started to fan the slits a bit. Like they're not entirely straight. They're a little bit shaped like that. And that's something that just makes a lot of sense to me visually. It's so much harder though. To carve the fan slits than the straight slits, because you're going to go against the grain at certain slits. But it's worth it, I think. On the bottom row, you see that I've started using the heart theme as well. I was also thinking like February is coming up. Maybe I'll finish these before, what's it called? Valentine's Day. Maybe I'll finish the set before Valentine's Day. It doesn't look like it right now though, but they're still cute. I just toyed with the idea of putting tiny hearts on top of the heddles, just as in the one that you saw earlier. So this is a good example of where I start out somewhere and then I just kind of carve my way forward through the ideas and just try out different stuff.
They are just beautiful.
Thank you. What do we have then? Yeah. So I did these pictures for, I wanted to, like, I have a setup so I can show you some live carving, but I wanted to do like a walkthrough of how I carve the heddles, because a lot of people will see the slits and they assume that I'm using a saw, but I actually am not, because that's not what I had when I was sitting out there in the countryside and the juniper bush fell in 2020. I had a carving knife and I had a, what's it called? A drilling machine, like the one that you drill holes in the wall with. That's the kind of tools that I had. So what I do is I begin on the far left picture, I start with marking up the silhouette of the heddle, and I don't use templates. I always draw like the shape, the silhouette of the heddle directly onto the wood. Because I'm like I'm like that. I'm like, what does the wood want to become? I'm like that kind of girl. What does the wood want to become? So I will start with marking out the holes that are going to be the holes in the middle, and then I mark up lines for where the slits are going to go. And that's to the far left. And so the right one. Yeah, that's what. I don't know left and right. I have so much problems with that. But okay. Right, and then I drill holes at the top and at the bottom of the slits that I marked up, so I can see exactly where I should drill those holes. I don't try to like mathematically understand where those holes are supposed to be. I just take a pencil and I draw a line starting between the holes in the middle row, and then I go up and then I go down. So after that, I grab a carving knife, a regular Mora 120, and I hold it, as you can see here in the picture, I have a grip, like I hold it with my fingers on the blade, and I cut down through the wood from the top hole to the bottom hole until I'm about halfway. And then I flip the piece over on the right picture here on the right hand side. You can see that the silhouette isn't showing. That's because I've flipped the piece of wood upside down. So I cut the last piece from the back. It's like digging a ditch, but with a knife and going straight down into the wood. Yeah, next slide, please. Thank you. So when I've opened up the slits, I take the knife and then I cut off the top and bottom layer of the wood. And this is to remove the splinters around the drilled holes and also at the top and bottom hole, because that can be kind of fuzzy. And when you just remove the top and bottom layer, it gets rid of a lot of the splinters. At this point, you will be asking if I use sandpaper, and I don't. And why don't I? Well, it's just like a snotty crafts thing. When I started carving, the people that I know who work with wood, they are schooled at Sätergläntan, having studied woodwork there. So they're schooled in like traditional slöjd and woodworking, and they would just not use sandpaper. And so I just didn't either, In hindsight, I've learned that if you use sandpaper, there are pros and cons of it. But the cons are that if you use it, it might leave small grains of sand in the wood. So if you want to correct something with the knife afterwards, after you use sandpaper, you're probably going to ruin your knife, which isn't very nice. It also leaves this kind of rugged surface. Even if you're using a super fine sandpaper, you're always going to get like this kind of velvety surface. And I understood that the polished surface that you get with only using a crafting knife is to prefer. And now I prefer it too, because that's how I do it. But there's no, it's not wrong. If you want to use sandpaper, you can, but I don't. So the last stages are after I've cut off the top and bottom layer of the wood. Basically, the heddle is done. Everything else is just embellishment. I like to cut. It's not called faces. It's called something else. Bevels. I like to cut bevels on the dents, like the things that go like this. That the slits are spaced in between are called the dents, teeth, in the heddle. And I like to just cut bevels on them so that they become a bit more rounded. And of course, making faces or other decorations is really something that I think is very, very fun to do. Yeah, I added this slide because I've been working a lot with hollow shapes. Oh, what should I say? You see what's going on here. So I wanted to tell you how I do that. And basically, if I want to do a hole in the wood, again, because I don't have this kind of nice intarsia saws or stuff like that, I drill a lot of holes in the area that I want to take away. And then I just use this slim knife, which is really a chip carving knife, but I use it to cut the bevels on the dents. And I also use it for this. I just use it, I stick it in there in the holes and just start carving. And because there are so many holes drilled there, the wood fibers are just cut off in so many spaces. It's fairly easy just to clear them out with this small knife. This is a style of heddle that I'm working with. Like, this is kind of where I'm at right now. I think I'm going to paint these heddles blue as well and give them golden domed roofs. We'll see. I think that's the plan. We can look at the next slide. The next slide is just some spotlight on the books that I've written. The first one is Indigo, Cultivate, Die, Create. It was released in 2017 in English, I think. It's the colors of Ukraine. That's true, actually. Yeah, the blue and gold. The Mend and Patch book came about a year later, and it's a book on mending clothes. Basically, I had a denim store at the time, and I had a repair shop in it, and people would ask me to mend all kinds of things. And I was just like, no, but I can teach you how. And I wrote a book about it. And then there's Simple Weave. Weave Without a Large Loom is the English subtitle. This book has been released in English, but it's not available from American bookstores yet. It's going to arrive at the Vesterheim Museum bookstore in the beginning of March. I don't know why, really. It's like a distributional hiccup, I think.
I know our folks would love to have it in store as soon as possible. So
yeah.
once it's available in the States, the museum store will have it.
That's great. And the last slide is just, I think it's just three images of what's in the book. The book kind of rose from people buying my Heddles and then asking how to use them. So the book has Heddle carving, how I carve the Heddles. It also has how to weave bands on the Heddles. And my editor asked, is it only going to be slim bands in this book? So I added some bigger projects as well as picture weave on a frame loom and also the backstrap loom, which I hadn't worked with a lot before, but I got the chance to do it because I was going to write about it in the book and I absolutely loved it. And I think the main theme of the book is that I want weaving to be accessible. I want it to be cheap. I don't want it to be like, oh, you have to invest in a new loom first, when you can actually just go out and get a couple of sticks and make your own. I mean, it's not going to be like the quickest weaving you could ever do, but it's definitely going to be convenient and available, which I think is really important when you're starting out a new craft.
Wonderful.
Thank you. That's my presentation.
That's fabulous. Well, Kerstin, did you want to do some live carving demo? Do you want to take some questions? What's your preferred next thing? Because we're happy to go either direction.
Are there any questions about the carving?
There are a couple. Several folks have asked about what kind of wood you use. Like, I know you talked about juniper, but specifically, like, do you use green wood? Do you try and carve while it's still soft? Do you use dried out prepared wood?
Yeah, I started out with the juniper, but I stopped with that quite soon, or like maybe a year in. I had left juniper behind and started using birch instead. And I prefer to work with the wood dry, actually, because when I cut into the wood, I can show you. Let's see, I have the carving cam here. Sure, we'll see. So the technique is that I put the knife, it's kind of grainy. Can you see me? Yeah, you can see it okay. So I put the knife there and I just cut down there, yeah? And that creates a sort of, it's a small cut that I then can place slanted cuts towards to get wood away. And if this wood was green, it would kind of hug the knife sides. It would actually not be very convenient if the wood was green. I also like working with dry wood because it's always a bit scary when you work with green wood and you're not really experienced. As I said, I have no previous experience, or I've never taken a carving class. So I'm not really 100% sure of how to stop the wood from bending when it dries out.
Kerstin, I apologize. I had accidentally pinned your video, which made it my primary view as you were demonstrating carving there. But only I got to see the close-up. Everybody else face. So would you really demonstrate that? So sorry.
Yeah, I'll do it again. For sure. So I hold the knife. You can see I hold the knife kind of like a pencil. I have my thumb on the blade like that. If you're going to try it at home, the thing that you need to think about is that when you hold the knife as a pencil, those two fingers, they want to curl under there, just as when you're holding a pencil, but that's actually not so great because there's a sharp knife edge there. So they need to be held away from the blade. No fingers under the blade is a good rule. And then I just put the knife tip at the top hole and I make a straight cut down to the bottom hole. And then I make slanted cuts towards that straight cut. To remove wood. And so I cut like that until I come down to half of the wood's thickness or a bit more.
Great. can you show us by tipping it on its side how thick the heddle is?
Yeah, this piece of wood is, I would say it's 3.5 millimeters.
Mm-hmm.
3, not 4. It's fairly thin. But the thing is that this is thicker than the ones that when I started making heddles, they would be a lot thinner than this. I would use wood that was like 2 millimeters, or even 1.5 millimeter. Mm.
And how do you slice the blanks?
Oh, to get to here.
Exactly.
Yeah, I have a big. If you get me the other cam, like
yes.
the room cam. I have a tool that's called a froe, and then I take such a cute chopping block here. It's tiny. It's super cute. This is great. We get to have you at home. It's actually lovely. So I take a piece of wood, it's split up that, and then I place it where I want it. I place the froe where I want it to split. It's placed like on half.
Mm-hmm.
And then I hit it with a mallet. I'm not going to do it because it's going to destroy your speakers maybe with the sound. But I just hit it with a mallet and it splits quite nicely. If the wood is like a straight grain wood, which I opt for always using. Any other question?
Lorraine, do you want to ask one of them about the design of the heddles?
Sure. We've so enjoyed the embellishment that you put on your heddles and the embellishment we see on the old ones. Is there a functional reason for the embellishment?
I would say no. I mean, I have heddles. Yeah, and I don't have one right here. I have heddles that are just square with no added stuff on top or at the bottom, and they work so well for weaving. So it's not like you need a little grip, really. It's just nice, I think. Like with these are the ones that we looked at. Oh, we can look at them here. It's just nice when you weave, because you weave by pulling the heddle up or pushing it down to create different sheds for the threads. And it's just it's mainly fun, I'd say.
While we're still in this view, could you explain just briefly how band weaving happens, what goes in the slots and what goes in the holes?
Yeah, for sure. I'll get a band for you. Just give me a second.
Okay. Very good. And as our guests, if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A. It's a little easier for us to find them there and share your question with Kerstin.
Just fascinating getting to see the bevels come in and meet on the bottom side.
And to do all that beautiful work with 2 basic tools.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you, Kerstin.
Here's one of the square heddles that I talked about. It's the size of a potato chip. I like to think of them as crisps. So there are threads in the holes, yeah. There are also threads that go in the slits. And we'll see if I can. You would tie one end. You would just tie a knot here and tie that end to something that doesn't move. Do I have something here that doesn't move? Not right now. And then there's threads in the holes, but also threads in the slits. So maybe I can do like this. Maybe I can show it sideways. I saw a video on Instagram yesterday of somebody weaving sideways. Yeah, that's great. Mm-hmm. So you see there's the threads in the slits. When I press the heddle to one side, the threads in the holes are pushed that way. But the ones in the slits, they're free to move.
Mm-hmm.
And the space that opens up in between, it's called a shed. And that's where the yarn that you're weaving with to and fro, that's where you put in that yarn. So you open up a shed like that, put in the yarn, and then you open the second shed by pushing the heddle the other way. Now, I typically hold the heddle in that direction so that I have it strung. So I have the warp strung up so I can see the, sorry, that's a bit messy. I typically have it strung up like this, yeah? So I can see the band that I'm weaving. But you could just as easily hold it like that. No problem. Yeah.
Wonderful. As you're carving, do you have goals for the total weight or the balance of the heddle? Because sometimes Karen is commenting in the Q&A that she has seen heddles with huge tops and wondering how practical that would be. And somebody else had a comment in the chat that theirs tends to flip upside down and was wondering if it was because it was too top heavy.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like these big tops, I just like to think of somebody who wants to impress a possible spouse a lot. And they're like, I'm going to add another lion to this. I'm going to add another crown, because then she might love me. And I just think that's really, that's a fun way of thinking of it. And it actually makes the heddle less convenient to use, but he wouldn't know that because this is a very good example of something that's been very common, like in traditional craft, women would do the textile crafts and men would do the wood crafts. And so the people who are making the tools don't actually know how they are used and how additional weight on the top would affect the weaving. So a lot of these gifted, like the wooing gift heddles, they are very top heavy and they would have been used upside down. They wouldn't have been able to use them top side up. What I do now, when I started carving this style of skirted women, I would place the holes much further down and I would not have a solid block of wood here. And that would make the women always flip upside down. So when I sold them, I had to point out that the heddle would probably flip, so people would be using it like that. Which is it doesn't affect the weaving at all. It just affects your experience of weaving. And now I've started to make sure, I think since this Christmas or something, I started to make sure that I have equal amounts of material or more material down there. Not because, to me, it's traditionally, heddles have been top heavy. They have been flipping over. So I'm not bothered really by making heddles that flip over because that's in the nature of this kind of tool. But I also have started feeling but it is kind of nice. If you have a girl and you're going to weave with it, you want her to be facing upwards. I understand that. And that's what I want as well. So I've just started balancing my heddles that way now. There's also, there's a house here. And the first houses I made, there would not be just a section here of wood here. It would just start there maybe. And that would make it kind of bottom heavy because I want a roof. But now I'm making a bottom floor and then the slits and then the roof. So there will probably be a door and some window decorations here.
Nice.
How many slots and holes do these looms usually have?
I don't know. Traditionally, I would say that these small ones that I make are very uncommon, like the ones that are like a piece of jewelry. This is just because this is just so whimsical and not really. It's fun. It's totally usable, but it's not really efficient if you want to weave bands. So I would say, I'm not going to say. Yeah, I could say 17, 10, anything 10 to 30 holes. But I think if you would if I'm going to guess at like a median, I'm going to guess 24 holes.
And again, like you said, you don't have to use all of them when you weave.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Interesting.
I saw a question in the chat about what yarn I use or what material. I use linen or cotton or wool. I use yarn that is specifically made for weaving. I don't weave with knitting yarns. And yarn that's specifically made for weaving is usually plied, so it's not like a one ply. So this yarn, for example, I don't know if you can see it, but it consists of 2 strands that's been twisted together. Yeah. And that's kind of important when you weave bands, because otherwise it can just tear off and break. It's not very fun.
There's a question that came in about the women-shaped heddle, the girl-shaped heddle.
Yeah.
The slots curve in at the top. How does that affect the weaving process?
It doesn't actually. I thought it might, but it does not. I think there it might be like, again, like mathematically, if you look at it, if we were to do a comparison with 100 heddles and 50 of them were with carved slits and 50 of them were with straight slits, you would probably see a discrepancy. You'd probably see that the ones with the carved slits were a bit like there was like a higher degree of sometimes something tangles. But I wove in a lot of bands with these and I don't feel any difference. So if it was like a 90-degree angle, that would be a problem for sure. But I haven't really experienced any problem with this. These. Yeah.
Well, we all love blue, and one of the questions is indigo ever used for coloring wood?
I have used indigo for this one. The long answer to the question is that indigo is not typically a color or a pigment that artists use because it doesn't have the same light fastness as other pigments have. Like, so for the long run, it might not be a good idea to paint a painting with indigo and then expect it to hold up for several hundreds of years. But I've used indigo. So in this one, I've used milk paint, which is pigment and casein protein. And I think there's lime in there as well, but not like the fruit, but the mineral. So I bought a blue color, like a pre-mixed dye, paint that you just add water to. And then I mixed indigo into it to get this kind of super intense dark blue color as well. But of course, you can also dip wood in indigo dye. You can dip it into a vat. I've done it a lot, and I've done it with a small set of heddles that I did very early. But I don't know. I'm kind of not intrigued by dipping heddles in indigo right now. Maybe I will be one day, but it's just not on my wanted list right now.
Well, Lorianne, I think we have time for one more question. Do you see one more that feels like the perfect question to end with?
Oh, there's so many good questions, and we haven't been able to make it to all of them. But one question is about the bands that you create on heddles like this. Yeah. Historically, what were some of those bands used for? And today, what do you use your bands for?
Yeah, great question. They have historically been used largely as for an item of your clothing. So like to close up garments. Before we had stainless steel, any metal buttons that you would add to your clothes would rust when you wash the clothes, when you put them in water. And that wasn't a problem for woolen outer clothing, like the nice, if you're like into Norwegian bunad, for example, like the jackets and the pants, not a problem because you're not washing them like ever, or at least not often. You're washing them so seldom that it makes sense to take off the buttons before you wash them, if you do. But for the linen clothing, like the undergarments, you would use bands instead to tie up the garment, to close up your skirts at the sleeves, at the neck, and also for apron strings. So this kind of band that we've been talking about today, that does not have like a picked out pattern in woolen threads, which is very common in the bunad, for example. Those are more like the fancy day bands. This is the everyday band. This is like the denim, the jeans and shirt equivalent, jeans and t-shirt, the jeans and t-shirt of the pre-industrial garment.
That's great.
Thank you.
What do I use them for today? I love using them as hairbands. I don't have one in today. Today we don't really need hand woven bands. That's like the truth. Nobody's gonna live their life. Nobody's gonna have a bad life for not having hand woven bands. But I just delight in always having one with me. It's like, my friend sent me a picture yesterday. She was taking a big box home from the post office or from her food store, and she had strapped it to her bicycle with a hand-woven band. She was like, I'm so glad I had a band with me. When I was in the US, my bag broke. And so like I couldn't pull up the handle anymore. It was kind of one of these big bags that have the handles in, and you pull them up and push them down, and then it broke and I couldn't pull it up. But I had a hand-woven band with me, so I could tie that to the bag and drag it with that one, so I could still like use the wheels and not have to carry my super heavy bag to the airports, which was great, Yeah. So I think, sorry?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Kerstin, thank you for today's presentation. You are wonderful to spend time with, and I think we all learned a lot, and delighted in getting to be part of your home studio. Really, really special to get to have
this was great. I should do this more often.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. A huge thank you to all of you for attending today. I also would be remiss if I didn't thank our collections, exhibitions, development, accounting, communication, and marketing teams for everything they do to help make programs like this possible behind the scenes. I often get to be the smiling face for Vesterheim, and there are so many people working so hard to make things like this possible. So thank you to everybody else at Vesterheim. We did record today's session, and it will be added to Vesterheim's YouTube channel in late February. You may, when you close out of the Zoom, have a survey pop up on your screen. Otherwise, we will include a link to that also in the email that we send as a follow-up. In order to help us better serve you, we are always interested in your feedback and appreciate your thoughts. I promise we don't get our feelings hurt. We are grateful for honest feedback. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's program, please consider becoming a member or contributing a gift online. Programs like this would not be possible without folks like you. As we like to say, you cannot have a folk art school without the folks, and we are grateful to have you as our folks. If you're interested in joining us for further programs, we've got stuff open right now for registration all the way through the end of March. A couple wonderful webinars coming up. One from jeweler Liz Buchheit, who spent some time in Norway. Will be sharing information about what she learned from the Sami folks that she studied with while she was there. And another one from Erik Storsund from the Brute Norse podcast coming up on Valentine's Day. He's going to be sharing about some terrible love spells and ideas that you should absolutely not add to your everyday practice, but taken from historic Norwegian grimoires. So those are both going to be wonderful. Next week on Friday, February 10th, we open registration for all of the classes April through June, both online and in person. We'd love to have you join us again. Kerstin, thank you. Lorraine, thank you for being here as well.
Can I add some last info?
Absolutely, please.
So first, if you have the time, do listen to Erik Storesund's talk on love spells, because he is hilarious.
Yes.
He is so lovely and so funny. So if you have the time, make it a priority. Second, I will be doing a talk with the topic of my new book with American Swedish Institute. So it's also going to be a Zoom. It's on February the 19th. We're going to go in depth and look through the book and talk a little bit more about my background and life as a crafter. And third, I saw somebody asking for my website. It would be a crime not to mention it. My website is KerstinNeumüller.com. KerstinNeumüller.com. No weird dots over the U's or anything. And there's my web shop. There is a blog section. You can also see all the classes that I teach.
Yes.
The next Heddle drop is going to be sometime in February. I don't know when. We'll see. I'll let you know. You can always subscribe to my newsletter if you want a heads up.
Perfect. And we will make sure we include the link to your website as well as your Instagram handle. Because boy, you have beautiful Instagram content. It's always fun to scroll past one of your posts.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, thanks again, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. We hope you'll join us again soon. Bye.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Bye.